Dobra, włączę już nagrywanie, żeby... Najwyżej później się to wytnie. Kawałek. Zuma?
Okay, should we start? Hello, welcome to the panel about magic and technology in the literary world.
O, jednak będzie tłumaczyła.
W świecie literackim. Ja nie jestem na liście, się nawet nie będę przedstawiał, zadam tylko jedno kluczowe pytanie. Kto z obecnych tutaj na sali nie rozumie słyszanego języka angielskiego? Dobrze. Słuchajcie, czy to jest dowcip, czy tak naprawdę? Dobrze. To w takim razie mamy do wyboru... Excuse me for a while, I'm going to ask about the model of the translation for this panel. So, mamy dwa modele, które możemy zastosować. Pierwszy to jest ten model tradycyjny, w którym będę starał się tłumaczyć wszystko i jeżeli wypowiedź się zrobi długa, zacznę ją zapisywać i postaram się przetłumaczyć. Drugi model natomiast jest taki, że ja czuwam absolutnie, co było powiedziane i widzę Was, osoby, które tego tłumaczenia potrzebują. Kiedy podniesiecie rękę, to mogę przetłumaczyć. To jest bardziej ryzykowny, bardzo rzadko spotykany, ale możemy w ten sposób zrobić. Na pewno zapraszamy do zadawania pytań po polsku, które ja mogę przetłumaczyć po angielsku. Myślę, że to jest dobry... Czy coś takiego chcemy? Bo to by nam pozwoliło przeprowadzić wszystko po angielsku.
Że się nie da. Tak.
Dziękuję Wam wszystkim. Moja praca właśnie została zniwelowana do minimum. To bardzo dobrze się składa.
Nie odkręcę tego.
Oj, dobrze. To bardzo dobrze się składa, bo to był pierwszy panel, który tłumaczę.
Okay, so just for a warm-up, can you guys tell us a bit about yourselves?
My name is Brian McClellan. I write adult epic fantasy novels. Some of you may know me from the Powder Mage series, which has 6 books in Polish. And I think my Glass Immortals...
Nazywam się Brian McClellan, znacie mnie pewnie z książek... tłumaczenie... Seria o magach prochowych. A little bit slower, please.
Slower.
For both me and them. That's the same understanding of English, please.
Excellent. I'll have a new series, Glass Immortals, out in Polish sometime soon.
Mam nową serię. Potrzebuję sobie literatury, tej bibliografii która wychodzi niedługo w Polsce.
And yeah, that's me.
To ja? Znaczy to.
So, hello, my name is Amélie Wen Zhao. I am the young adult author of the Legacy of Blood series that's out in Poland. And then my recent work, Song of Silver, Flame Like Night, is another young adult fantasy. I don't think it's out in Poland yet, but it's a Chinese fantasy, and I'm super excited to be here.
Just go? Okay. So hi, I'm Brandon Mull, and I write a bunch of middle grade fantasy. Bashnubur, Smokestras. I don't know how to say them all. There's 5 Kingdoms, there's Candy Shop Wars.
You were really good, and even I know this time.
But I am delighted to be here. Thank you.
So this is a question for each of you. How do you approach incorporating magic and technology into your worlds? What are the key factors you consider while writing? So maybe from Amélie, you start.
Sure. So, key factors. Whenever I look into integrating magic and technology into my world, I always think of it at first thematically. And then in terms of how that permeates into the entire world, into the society, into the construct of the politics and everyday life. So in Legacy, do I need to pause or?
Nadążamy, czy tłumaczymy? Dobrze, idziemy dalej.
So in the Legacy of Blood series, it's about for anyone who hasn't read it, it's about an exiled heir who has the power to control blood, so that's her magic. And she has to partner with a scheming conman to unravel the corruption at the heart of her empire. So in it, there's a group of magic users that are, feared and reviled for what they're able to do and what their powers are able to do. And there's oppression from the government, and there are different attitudes towards people with this magic. These people are essentially sent to what's called indentured labor within certain parts of that world. And the story is about, justice and fighting corruption and fighting oppression for them. In terms of...
Jest okej? Dobrze. Okej. Podniesione ręce oznaczają okej, czy że mam to podsumować? Jest okej, dobrze. We're good.
So the key aspects, is how does this group of magic users, how do they filter from the politics of everything down to the everyday life? How do they use their magic, and essentially what themes do they want to convey? And as stated, it's about justice and fighting for human rights across all types of people in this world.
Cool. You are an audience of geniuses. I can't believe I'm in Poland presenting in English without a translator.
I am not here.
For a large room, you are geniuses. You should be impressed with you. I'm impressed with you. So yeah, that's a good job. That's amazing. If I spoke a different language in the United States, they would be so helpless. Almost everybody. I speak Spanish. I have one other one. So magic. In Fablehaven, for example, on Basnibor, I'm trying to find magic. I want magic to feel real and hidden. I want it to feel like it exists in our real world, but kind of hidden, kind of around the corner, or the place you didn't look is where the magic is hidden. So when I'm designing magic, I want it to make sense, I guess, is how I could say it. Like if the reader understands the rules of the magic, then the story can make much more sense. You can understand the choices the characters are making if you know what magic can do and what it can't do. At least some basics about what it can do and what it can't do. And so for me, it's a lot of daydreaming, a lot of thinking to find magic that makes sense to me, and then to stay really true to the rules I set up.
Zobaczyć, czy jest okej?
So for me, it's almost kind of the opposite. I like my magic to be so front and center that I don't really talk about it that much. It's part of the world, it's ingrained. Everyone in the world knows about it. Everyone has it as part of their daily life. I love exploring the way it changes kind of the political structure of the world. My books all are set in kind of a Napoleonic era. So you have a lot of change going on in general, especially when it comes to the politics and the technology, industrial revolution. And I love exploring how magic changes along with the world around it. It's, for me, the fun is kind of creating these big epic scale backdrops against which my characters, they don't really use magic to solve their problems. Magic is just one of the things that they have and one of the things that they have to deal with. I really like that idea of magic being almost mundane for my worlds. And it makes it kind of wondrous for us because we don't have that. Our mundanity is technology, you know, like having a phone that can see everything in the world. But I like exploring how that mundanity changes things for my characters.
I like that thought of making it feel so normal that they can take it for granted.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
cool.
What about technology? Because you answered like half of the questions. I'm gonna ask about like your approach to technology now, and that means whether it's like phones. I guess in your case it's more like older technology sometimes. So how do you approach that part, and how does it like interact with the magic in your worlds? So maybe from you, Brian.
Want me to start this time? Okay, so a lot of my stories are portal fantasies where we cross to another world or we find magic hidden among us. In Five Kingdoms, that's kids getting kidnapped into another world. Or in Fablehaven, it's hidden wildlife parks for magical creatures. So I deal with technology differently in different series, but let's take Fablehaven as an example. In Fablehaven, we are in our real world, sort of like an alternate Earth, I guess, where secret wildlife parks for magical creatures are the thing that makes it different from our real world. So I have a lot of technology, theoretically, all the technology we have today could be in the story. But I created the dragon sanctuaries or the wildlife parks for magical creatures are set up such that the caretakers try to limit technology. Sort of like at a wildlife park, how you wouldn't want to throw lots of tin cans in with the lions or something. Like they want to keep it pure. And so it keeps some of the technology out of my story. I don't want too much technology in the story. I don't want them solving problems with cell phones or using cell phones once they're in the wildlife parks. I want that to feel like a more medieval, magical, otherworldly type experience, sort of. So I'm trying to suppress technology in Fablehaven, at least.
For my Powder Mage books, like it's very specifically the technology of black powder, very common black powder that everyone uses for their guns. And you have these powder mages that can manipulate that powder. They imbibe it, they gain powers from it. They can shoot across battlefields, and I like taking the look at how does this new thing, relatively new thing, black powder, and the magic that comes along with it, how does that change everything around it? How does it change the structure of the world? For instance, the Powder Mage series has several different magic systems, and there's a very old, established magic system that suddenly is under threat from the Powder Mages. Because what good is being able to level a city if somebody can put a bullet in your head from across a battlefield? It's suddenly, there's a trump against these really powerful mages. And so it changes the kind of geopolitical structure of everything in this world where, very much like early 1800s Europe, everything's changing constantly, and there's war everywhere, and suddenly everything is, things can be decided by a single bullet instead of the old big sorcery slugging fest.
I was thinking back on how I use magic in both of my current series, or magic and technology, and for me, I use magic in a way that more so represents wonder, like something that we don't have, like in our mundane lives, right? Whereas technology, I figured through my writing, is usually used to harvest and to oppress that magic. So taking Legacy of Blood as an example, you have these magic users that can wield different aspects of the world, whether it's physical, such as blood, or metaphysical, such as your thought. And then you have these technology items, such as black rock or sea rock, that can be used to either restrain them or to take away their powers, or to like siphon away their powers and use it yourself. So that's one thought. And then in my newest series, which deals with essentially what is a fantastical version of a colonized China-esque land, magic was used by the ancient Chinese magicians as a source of like wonder and harmony with the earth, whereas technology was used by the conquerors that came to the land, and they have, much like Industrial Revolution types, with a lot of metal magic used to harvest the natural magic of the Chinese magicians. So I think technology, for me at least, it's more of a, more of an evil, whereas magic, it represents more of a wonder, but can also be used to be more lethal than, what we have in the real world.
Okay, so this actually leads very well to my next question, which is about how does interaction between, or lack of the interaction between technology and magic, do you think in your books it's important to you to that this relationship it reflects the real world issues and problems in any way? I think in your books that's a very prominent theme. So maybe you can start.
Sure, and the question was if the themes reflect the real world in any way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, at least for me, when I set out to write my books, even though it's fantasy and there's so much magic and wonder that doesn't exist in our real world, I'm always seeking to portray something of our real world into these books. And I think magic usually serves to kind of heighten those stakes and make it so much more exciting. So instead of, couldn't turn on my cell phone at the right time to make it to a meeting, it's I couldn't use my magic to unlock that rock and the whole kingdom's gonna fall. So it really serves to heighten the stakes and brings out how the characters make their choices that truly represent what kind of human being they are. And you like to, at least I like to, when I read books like Game of Thrones or other fantasy books, I like to think, if I were the character, what would I do in that situation? But yeah, Legacy of Blood is very much dealing with issues in the real world. It deals with modern day trafficking. So a lot of these magic users in the world are being trafficked and sold and profited off of their magic. So I think it shows, the cruelty of humanity, but also the beauty in that there are people who are willing to fight for these magic users and to, make a fairer world.
Whoa, okay, very exciting. So one place in one of my books where I have magic and technology overlap a lot is in my 5 Kingdoms series. So your premise is these kids have been kidnapped into another world. And this world has 5 different kingdoms. Each kingdom has different magic that works there, and very distinct from each other. So if you have a magic sword in one kingdom and move to the next, it might not work there or be magic anymore. And in one of the kingdoms, this is book 3, magic has been used to develop advanced technology. So you have magic-powered computers, magic-powered robots, magic-powered monorails. You have, instead of being based on electricity, it's fueled by magic. And to me, that was fun, because I let magic wear the clothes of sci-fi. And it was an interesting, I've never written straight sci-fi, but I finally wrote a book with robots and hoverboards and cool stuff like that. That was fun to create a magical excuse to do sci-fi vibe, yeah.
So in my new series, the Glass Immortals series, the magic is all basically the technology of the world. It's very common. It's literally mined from the ground. They create this, they mine cinder sand, and glass engineers turn it into magic baubles that can give normal people extraordinary powers. And the entire theme around from the very beginning of the book is that the cinder sand is almost out. There's gonna be no more magic. And so when you have a very advanced society that is kind of, global empires, they're, kind of the age of sail sort of time period, where they're all over the place, and then suddenly the thing that your empire is built on is running out very quickly, and there's nefarious forces at work that's speeding that process along. That does kind of link in a bit to modern day, because we're looking at the idea of shortages, you know, like when oil runs out, you know, what happens when all these metals that we depend on to make our watches, you know, and our phones, you know, we're looking at limited resources and desperately trying to figure out how to survive as a society over the course of the next 100 years. And I try to reflect that a lot in the series.
Okay, so before my next question, are there any questions from the audience? Do you guys want to ask any questions? You can ask them in Polish and we can translate.
So when you create your worlds, of course the magic is intertwined in them, but what would you say is more important, the magic or the world? You put in magic into your vision of the world, or does your world change along in the writing process to accommodate the magic? Reverse.
I mean, for me, it's very intertwined. The world will reflect the magic will reflect the world. I think every author is going to be different on that, because my personal interest tends to be in the big political picture. You know, I like having these gigantic things like the French Revolution, but with magic. You know, that was the pitch for my first series, and so it's kind of, they're very intertwined. But I also know, you know, I want to write epic fantasy. So, you know, I'm making up these new worlds, but I want them to have magic in them. I know that readers like myself enjoy the magic, and that's one of the things that keeps them coming back. But for me, the real love is the kind of intricate, you know, political systems and all the relationships going on these very high levels of, you know, government and war and you know, kind of, you know, big ideas. I really like that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. For me as well as an author, and every author is going to be different, but for me, the magic shapes the world and the world shapes the magic. So in Legacy of Blood, they go to multiple kingdoms based on, you know, different parts of our world. In one of them, it's called the Kingdom of Pyrkonu, and it mirrors, you know, Western Europe or the United Kingdom back when it was an empire, and they've used technology to start to harvest the magic and to steal it, essentially. Whereas you have, on the other side of the world, an Chinese-inspired kingdom, the Kingdom of Mera, where the magic is more, you know, in harmony with nature, which follows the Buddhist and Taoist principles of ancient China and a lot of the East Asian cultures. So definitely shaping the world and different cultures and different religions, shaping the magic itself too, and how it's used.
For me, I think a lot about so when I write fantasy, I get to break or change the rules of reality. And I'm thinking about what new story opportunities are now possible with this new reality I've created. What's maybe an example, in my Beyonders series, there are these people that are seed men or seed women, people of the seed. These guys have seeds at the base of their skull. So if you kill them, the seed pops out, it maintains their mind. You can plant the seed, they can regrow and live again. Does that make sense? Like that basic idea? And so with that idea, I can do lots of stuff story-wise that I can't do. I can have a hero die and come back into the story, and I can have the grandpa be young and the grandchild is old because of when they died and were reborn, or do you hear what I'm saying? So I'm always eager and looking, okay, if I change reality like this, what cool story stuff can I do with that, right? And so even more than thinking about how will it affect the world? I think lots about how will it affect the story I'm telling, right? Like, what are the new opportunities now with these new magical rules I've established? Yeah.
So you water the people and they grow?
Yeah.
So cool!
Like a big plant grows like with a pod, and the person like hatches out of the pod and like they're back alive again. And you have to think through lots of rules to make that make sense, but I've thought it through. Like, yeah, you're reborn at the age you first die. So they have like a ceremonial death at age 20, right? Where it's happy birthday to you, as I stab you to death. Right? But it's merciful for them, it makes sense for them, it doesn't make sense for us. Yeah.
Bierzemy jeszcze to pytanie z publiczności? Ja się, tu było jeszcze, bo tam mamy. Okej. So, czy tutaj miał pytanie wcześniej? Okej, dobra. Wracamy do głosu.
I wanted to ask how realistic be for a book, and where should the realism end in magic?
You want to answer first?
Sure, I'll answer first. So there's two things operating here for me. There is, I gain something by having the magic make sense, because then there's a context shared by the reader to make sense of the choices the characters make. What we lose with that is some of the wonder of magic. What can it maybe do? What are the mysterious things? So I like to make my magical rules with some blurry edges, where we're not sure about everything it can do, so there's room for discovery, room for wonder. Some people did that accidentally or brilliantly, like Tolkien, trying to define exactly what Gandalf can and can't do. That is hard. We know we've seen him do some stuff. One person best explained it to me. Gandalf's great power is he can rise to meet almost any foe. In the hour of need, he can rise to meet it. That's hard to explain in a logical way, right? But more or less, he's got a power sort of like that. And so, for me, I like a blend. I don't want it to be completely comprehensible, but comprehensible enough to make sense of the story. And that, to me, I'm walking on a tightrope with that, to keep magic feeling mysterious and wondrous.
Yeah, I tend to not leave a lot of mystery to my magic. It tends to be very straightforward of this is what can be done. And I like that. It's kind of, it's easier for me to write. It makes sense to me, and it makes sense to the reader. And like Brandon was saying, you do have to walk a bit of a tightrope of presenting something to the reader that they're going to find cool. Whether it's because you do cool things with it, or it gives them the sense of wonder, or whatever, something that just, it kind of makes your heart swell when you're reading it. But you also have to have it grounded enough for the reader to not roll their eyes all the time. Because the moment that your magic becomes cheesy, or it becomes like it doesn't make sense within the context of the world, that's when readers tend to kind of fall asleep or walk away, and you got to kind of draw back from that.
Yeah, I think like Brandon, I am also more of the rules, but with like a blurred edge, so that it keeps some of the wonder. I do prefer to have slightly more defined rules to my magic, just because I like playing with the thought that whenever you use magic or any sort of a special ability, there has to be a kind of cost, right? So with my magic users in Legacy of Blood, they get very tired and they have these mutations that appear physically when they're drawing on their magic, and that's why they're often, reviled or feared. And then with so I think it has to come with a kind of cost, otherwise it's just limitless, you can beat any foe, you can do whatever. But at the same time, having some unexplained portion to keep the mysticism and the, I guess, magic of why we read fantasy is also really important to me.
One more question from the audience, because this guy from the back, because he was raising his hand for like 10 minutes now.
You get that for the perseverance.
Okay, so what was the first? The rules for magic and technology, or the idea for a story? Or did it evolve in the process?
I mean, for me, the story tends to happen first, and then I think about magic that would end up in that world. I tend to build a world, like, kind of start imagining what a government would look like, what the military forces would look like, what conflict looks like in this world. And then from there, I think about, how do I want the magic to affect it? What role do I want the magic to play? For my new series for Glass Immortals, I built out kind of a political system, and I had a very strong idea of what the world looked like. And then I kind of knew that I wanted a very industrial magic of some kind, and I had some ideas that I worked on, and I didn't like them. I just discarded them. I had an early idea that kind of turned into what it was, where these special kind of glass makers would make little baubles that would imprison djinn, and then you could use these djinn for different purposes later on. And it never really worked the way I wanted to, but then I decided to keep the glass aspect, and kind of that morphed into God Glass, which is this thing that everybody can use and that helps them enhance themselves.
Oh, yeah. For me, I always, there's no normal way for me to develop my story. Do we have daydreamers in the room? People who like to daydream? We're at the right place. But for me, I measure and weigh my daydreams. There are some daydreams I have that the more I think about it, the worse they get. They get thinner and more boring. There's every now and then I have a daydream where the more I think about it, or the more energy I put into it, the better it gets. And it keeps getting cooler and better until it turns into a playground or an amusement park in my mind. That's where I know I found something I want to make. And so where do I start with that? It depends. Sometimes it might be a cool magical idea of a seed guy. Like that was one of the early ideas in my Beyonder series, the people with the seed. I was like, that's cool, that has to happen. Like the more I think about it, the better it gets. Or like, what if we had a secret wildlife park for magical creatures? With that premise, the more questions I asked, what kind of creatures would live there? What secrets or treasures are they hiding? Who would, and like the more I asked questions, it got better and better in my mind. So I kind of build this movie in my mind, and once the movie's cool, then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna share this with people. This is awesome. They're gonna love it. That kind of thing. That's how my process sort of goes.
Yeah, I think it's different for every single person, but I take a blend of both Brandon and Brian, where I kind of start with a scene or a character and a moment, and then I build up the magic from there, and then take the opposite approach where I look at how it impacts the politics, the government, the culture, the society. So with Legacy of Blood, I just had an image of a girl who's on the run in a prison, but she has the terrifying power to control people's blood. And then from there on, it just evolved into, why can she control people's blood? Are people scared of it? What is the government going to do about it? Are there more people who can control other things? So building up, usually for me, for at least the books that I've written, have started with a concept or a scene with a character and a goal, and then building out the magic and the world from there.
And to follow up on that, do you guys think your mindset in terms of magic and technology evolved like in time, or was it the same when you started writing, or is it now different, or when you plan your next books, do you think it's going to be different or the same?
One of the things I like about writing is it's almost like a history of different versions of me, right? Because when I wrote Fablehaven Book 1, I was a different guy than right now. Since Fablehaven Book 1, I've been through a divorce, I've been through enormous amounts of pain, but you learn so much from the pain, you know, and so it makes you a better writer after you really hurt. It really does. It's like trying to find the bright side, you know. The bright side is, oh, I'm gonna be a good writer. Like, glad I fell out that raft in the rapids, that's gonna be useful. That's true, like, it happened, almost died. But like, it's, so absolutely yes. I'm always changing and learning and trying to take all the new stuff I've learned with all the best that I used to have and bring that to my new project.
Yeah, I definitely like the books you write are like a picture in time of the person you are and what kind of, you know, interests you have and what you set out to explore. So looking back at, you know, the first book, Legacy of Blood, you know, it was like I was like very much more emo and I was like, justice, you know, revolution, and then when I wrote my next series, which is based on, it's a Chinese fantasy, and it's very much ingrained in the stories I grew up with. That was a period when I was very homesick, and it was during the pandemic, during lockdown, when I couldn't visit China. And so I was like, well, I'll just, you know, imagine it and write it into a book, essentially. So it's very much snapshots of you as a person, or little bits of your soul, like Horcruxes in Harry Potter. Like each book is one of those, and I think it's always shifting as you go.
Oh, absolutely. It's, you know, you're always changing. You're always coming up with new things. You know, I spent the last 30 minutes talking about how I like to build these big political worlds. But you know, a few weeks ago, I had this idea pop into my head for a techno druid. This guy that is able to hear the soul of robots, and this little spider robot that's his companion. I don't know what I'm gonna do with that. I wrote it down, I sketched out some ideas, but I'm also under contract for a bunch of books, and so I've got other things to do right now, and maybe I'll come back to that, and I'll build a world around this one idea that I had super late at night, but I don't know, maybe not.
Okay, and just before the panel, we talked a bit about how you, Brian, you write books for older audiences, like adults, and you guys write for like young adults or even younger. But if you were to switch roles right now, and you were to write a book, you for young adults or younger, and you guys for adults, do you think you would approach magic and technology in a different way than you do right now, or is it just the same?
I would probably do it the same exact way.
I think I would try to play with different types of magic. Like middle grade is so much fun, and I think there's a lot of kind of wonder in that. With different bugs, like you can just, you know, be like, oh, I'm gonna throw in like a giant bug, or people that grow out of seeds, and you know that's an idea that flies. So I think I would try something very different if I were to write a different genre. But yeah, another little piece of my soul for the future.
And I cheat all the time as far as like not writing just middle grade. I always cheat up. And so I have a series called Beyonders that it's almost like it could, if I change some ages really quickly, it becomes adult fantasy. And the next one I have coming, which is called The Forbidden Mountain, if I tweaked it a little, it could so easily be adult fantasy. So J.K. Rowling kind of showed me the closest thing you can get to reaching everybody is write a really good middle grade novel, you know, because that reached almost everybody. And so I'm trying to write Harry Potter kind of fantasy. I'm trying to kind of write something an adult might like too, with even when I have young main characters. Does that make sense? So I would probably do it the same, because I'm sort of trying to cheat a little bit right now anyway. So.
Okay, we got like 5 more minutes, so maybe a question from the audience.
Here's the question. Raise your hand for the last half an hour.
Sorry, it took like 2 hours or even 3 hours. He would buy.
Okay, because there was said that in different times people have different thoughts about how to write and what to comprehend, what to explain in their fantasies. And do you think that when you use some solutions, you used some solutions in your books a few years ago, would you write your books different right now, knowing what you know now, or do you think that some endings could be changed because you have different ideas, different perception of the world right now?
Oh, absolutely. So my first book, Promise of Blood, I wrote that when I was 24, and I'm 37 now. I'm a very different person than I was that many years ago. And if I was to rewrite it, even, like knowing everything I know today and looking back at the book, it would probably be a very different book. The magic would probably be a little bit more defined. The characters would be quite a lot more complex. There'd be a lot of changes.
For me, I think when I was younger, I was more relaxed about being weird, like being really weird, and so maybe I'm glad I can't go change that. Does that make sense? Like I'm glad I was so weird. Like my Candy Shop War book. When I wrote book 1 of that, I wrote it in between Fablehaven 2 and 3, so early in my career. I partly wrote it because I wanted to prove I've got more in me than just Fablehaven. Like, I wanted to say, there'll be more books besides just this, right? And with Candy Shop War, it was like magic in a normal neighborhood, normal kids, but really weird magical candy that had strong powers. Kind of like, like in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the fizzy lifting drink that can make Charlie fly. I wanted the whole movie to be about that. Like magical candy and stuff. And so I made a really weird, the fantasy is so weird in that. And I just recently finally wrote the 3rd and final book for that. And I had to go back to a younger mindset. Okay, Candy Shop War, really silly, really weird, magical carnival, or think of stuff that was really odd. And so I think sometimes when I was young, some of the things I would change, I shouldn't change, because there was virtues to how weird I was. I don't know, that's a terrible long answer, sorry.
Love it. I've only published 4 books, so a lot less in my catalog than these guys. So I don't know that I would change anything that's happened in Legacy of Blood. I might go back and, insert some more, or edit myself some more, because I was rereading it before this panel because I forgot some things, and I was like, oh no, I just crossed out this word here, or this is so bad. But I think I'm glad that I can't change it, because it shows you who you were at the time, and you're always growing and changing as a writer too. So I would just keep them as they are, and then keep going with little bits of our souls.
I love that you were rereading, because sometimes at panels you get a really specific question, and you're like, I really wrote it. It wasn't a slave I keep in the basement. It was me, but I don't remember.
Someone asked me the capital city of my empire. I was like, oh my god, I can't remember. It's like a key city that everything took place in.
Trivial Pursuit, that's all about you, and you're like, oh, I'm the only fool who does not know. Yeah.
Okay, so we actually... yes?
We have time for one more? We have time for one more question?
I don't think so. Do we? No, sorry. So many thanks for your answers. It was a great panel. So many thanks.